you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I'll send it to chat.
All right, I think we are ready to call this the first meeting of the Quality of Life Committee to order. And we will need a roll call to see that we have a quorum.
Okay. Councilor Romero Worth,
I am here.
Councilor Rivera,
Here.
Councilor Villarreal,
Present.
Councilor Cacique Sanchez,
Here.
and Councilor Garcia. Oh,
Terrific,
he's
we
there,
have
but
a
he's
quorum.
muted. You have a quorum.
All right, can I get, are there changes to our agenda this evening? And let's see, if there are no changes, I'd entertain a motion to approve it.
Move for approval.
Second.
So Councilor Rivera moved to approve, Councilor Villarreal seconded the motion. I think we have to have a roll call on this.
Yes. Councilor Romero Worth,
Yes.
Councilor Cacique Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia,
Yes.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
and Councilor Villarreal.
Yes.
Your motion passes.
Fabulous. So we have an agenda. We'll move to the consent agenda. Do councilors want to pull either of the items on the consent agenda? Okay, I think,
Just a minute.
okay. No worries.
I have a quick question for item A.
Okay, so we will pull item A. Everybody good with item B? We'll have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Move to approve
As amended.
There's,
as amended.
Second.
is there a second?
Second.
All right, so we have Councilor Cacique Sanchez approving the consent agenda as amended. Councilor Villarreal is the second, and we'll need a roll call on this as well.
Okay. Councilor Cacique Sanchez,
Yes.
Councilor Garcia.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Better.
Councilor Rivera,
Yes.
Councilor Villarreal,
Yes.
and Councilor Romero Worth.
Yes,
Your motion passes.
fabulous. So we have a passed agenda, a passed consent agenda, and we will then move to item A. Councilor Villarreal, I believe that's you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think Kyle's on the phone, right? Hey, Kyle. Good to see you. I just had a quick question. I know that there's criteria for this particular grant about what kind of activities will take place. And I'm just wondering, for that scope of work, does that shift then if there's different emergency needs, like what we're in right now with the current pandemic? Are you able to change that scope of work to reflect what needs we have as it relates to emergencies?
Yeah, so the state has already reviewed the position's description, which is just very generic to participate in emergencies as they pertain to active disasters or response, recovery, mitigation, preparedness, the whole gambit for emergency management. So this position would specifically assist my department in anything that they need as it pertains to their job description. And that is the same as my other emergency management specialist position that recently got filled with Brian Williams. We're glad to have him on board, but it is the same position description and would support our office in the same way.
Okay, and I guess I was thinking more that position had certain activities that they needed to fulfill, and some were like, doing training and they're in-person things, and now that we can't necessarily do that, that those would shift and you all would prioritize whatever activities that person would do then related to our current conditions.
Yes, a lot of those activities are very malleable and can be throughout the course of the grant or the sub-grant agreement with the state. The priorities of the grant can be touched a little bit here and there, and then the position that they've approved they understand that those activities would ebb and flow. And I think that they would appreciate the changes and being able to support the city in the current affairs as well. So.
Great, thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay, are there other questions on this item from the other members of the committee? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve this item?
Move to approve.
Second?
Second. Second.
All right, so Councilor Villarreal moves and Councilor Cassett Sanchez seconds the motion to approve item A from our consent agenda. We need a roll call, please.
Counselor Villarreal,
Yes.
Counselor Cassett Sanchez,
Yes.
Counselor Garcia, Counselor Rivera,
Yes.
Counselor Romero Worth,
Yes.
motion approved.
Fabulous. So that takes us through our consent agenda. We will now move to item number 6, the city's response to meeting community needs during the COVID-19 pandemic is what I would add on that. And I just want to start by thanking Kira Ochoa, our Community Services Director, Rich Brown, our Economic Director, and Julie Sanchez with the Children Youth Program Manager for being with us on this historic first meeting of this first committee. And also just want to thank you for all your work, because I know that you have been this is probably consuming not only your waking hours, but your sleeping hours too. So I just want to thank you for everything you're doing. And I want you to know it's not going unnoticed. And we're very pleased to have you tonight, and look forward to hearing from you about what all the things you are doing. So Kira, I don't know, I'm gonna pivot to you, and I don't know how you all want to present this item, but Kira, I'll let you take it.
Just want to start, Kira, by saying I'm going to share the screen with the slides.
Great. Chair Romero Worth, councilors, thank you so much. Could not have imagined that this would be the circumstance under which we would be having our first quality of life committee meeting. None of us could have, and yet it's also very apt. So I'd like to start by sharing some of what we've done in the Community Services Department to respond to the pandemic in the last month, really. And Rich, will you be flipping the slides for me then?
Yeah, just say next slide.
I'll do a little like that.
Okay.
So in community services, we started very early on in early March to really be thinking about, actually late February, to be thinking about this notion of community spread and how we might minimize community spread of the virus. We were, of course, very concerned about homeless shelters as a potential tinderbox. They were kind of like our cruise ships in a way, and what we could do about that. And then we also were thinking very much about our existing Connect network and how we could utilize that to meet some of the economic hardships that people were going to be facing around, increased needs for resources in our social determinants of housing, food, transportation, and of course, a core jobs and businesses. So a key piece of our strategy, which I'll talk more about as we go, was our existing Connect network, which I know many of you have heard me talk about. So Rich, we can go to the next slide where I'll talk about how we address the community spread issue. So our big strategy, working in partnership with our shelters, Interfaith and St. Elizabeth, was how do we reduce the census in the shelters? How do we get fewer people in the shelters so that they can, the people there can socially isolate a little bit better and of course the staff can be safer. And it was a real quick evolution around that. We worked, first of all, in partnership with La Familia and Healthcare for the Homeless to do best practices.
Kira, did we lose you?
I hope not. Am I still here? Can you
I
hear me?
hear her.
Chair Romero.
I hear her as well. Kara, I think Councilor Romero works. She's frozen on my screen, so.
Okay.
Yeah, so hold on, I'm trying to see what I can do to get her back.
But Councilor Romero works, I think Kara's good to go.
Kara's still on, Counselor.
Okay,
Can you hear me, Councilor Romero Worth?
I can hear you now. Did you,
Okay.
but you faded out there, so sorry.
Sorry. So I was saying that we worked with Healthcare for the Homeless, who trained shelter staff and talked about best practices around eating individualized meals instead of congregate meals. Simultaneously, I was in communication with hotels and the Department of Health, who were also looking at how to get some hotels open for unhoused people to reduce the pressure on the shelters. We started that way, and we were able to quickly identify that hotels weren't going to work for everyone, at which point our public works director, Regina Wheeler, stepped in to mobilize the Midtown Emergency Shelter. And I'm happy to talk more about that as well. So the goal was, again, reducing the community spread, relieving pressure on our local hospital system, because the more that they would have to deal with people who didn't have places to go if they were awaiting testing, the more pressure would be put on their system. And finally, I'll talk about how we wanted to provide relief to residents through Connect and also our Built for Zero project to eliminate homelessness. And then finally, how we want to continue to bolster the project by developing a donation structure that can help us keep feeding the Connect network so that people's immediate emergency needs can be met. Rich, please go to the next slide. So I don't mean to be around the map, but I just want to flag that our first move in reducing the community spread, as it was citywide, was to get city employees working remotely. In community services, as you know, we have 185 employees, and we were able in fairly short order by, I think it was March 27th, to have everyone out of the community services department who wasn't an essential worker. That left really our senior services team, and I cannot say enough about what they're doing in this crisis. They restructured quickly. Gino, who has thankfully a military background, which was put to great use here, he developed a team A and a team B so that if workforce were impacted and if in the worst case scenario, one team took ill, the other team could continue to function. They've ramped up operations and are delivering 3 times the number of home delivered meals, no longer doing congregate, obviously, or anything happening at the centers. They continue their essential transport. And they're also now offering commodities, delivering them to people's homes, as well as doing drop-offs. Youth and Family Services has been amazing as well. Julie can talk a little more about this if you have questions, but she's also tooling up her team to do remote learning for the kids in the after school and summer program. The libraries, as you may know, really retooled and took on delivering more online content, wonderful stories for books and babies and story times. And actually they've issued 150 new library cards during this time. So they're really being creative around using online resources. Finally, as you know, I supervise the public defender in the municipal court, and the municipal court is able to do a lot of productive work telephonically with pretrials, hearings, drug court, and so those are the things that sort of the department's response in the direct services that we offer. So back to this, how we did working with the shelters. First of all, so much credit to Joe DeBranis and his staff, as well as Edward Archuleta at St. Elizabeth's. They have now reduced reduced by 67% the number of people in shelters. I talked to Edward today. There are 10 people in the men's shelter, 7 people in the women's shelter. And at Pete's, which normally serves about 120 dinners a night, houses about 90 people a night, they're down to 35 people, and 44 people are in hotels. At St. Elizabeth, about 8 people are in a hotel. And so that's involved close partnership, and some of the emergency funding that came through the city, as well as county funding, has enabled guests at those shelters to stay in hotels. So that was not enough, however, because we knew that there would be people that would be awaiting testing, perhaps COVID positive, or otherwise unable to use the shelters or be in hotels, who would need a place to be. And so the other part of what we accomplished was to coordinate with Christus very closely. They were extremely concerned, obviously, about the unhoused population that would be getting tested and where they would go, because, you know, that's a carrier that goes out into the community, and you can't trace the spread of the disease if they have it very easily, and you can't take care of them very well. La Familia and the county with behavioral health providers have now combined forces to really assist our operations at the Midtown. Regina Wheeler has done and her people have done a phenomenal job of opening up the Midtown. There are now served 19 people as of today. She has a lot more capacity out there. And it's quite an operation. Community services staff from the libraries are staffing the shelter, along with youth and family services, a member of the Parks and Rec department, and others are stepping in every day to lend a hand. I think Rich and his son went by to deliver cookies this afternoon, so he can talk about that. It's being operated in close coordination with Department of Health for safety protocol. We're happy to say that I think it's 10 out of the 19 people have tested negative for COVID, and nobody has tested positive yet. Everyone else who's there is awaiting test results. Youth Works is providing prepared meals every day, and I'm working with the county closely on their New Mexico Solutions behavioral health provider, who offers mental health supports and coordination, as well as healthcare for the homeless. They do daily phone check-ins to see how people are doing medically. And I can answer lots of questions about what's happening at Midtown. It's a pretty remarkable endeavor. Primary goal is, of course, to provide a safe place for people who have symptoms of COVID, are waiting test results, have tested negative, but don't have a place to go in the community, and we want to avoid them having to go back through a revolving door. And then we do have some numbers just of the general population of homeless folks who may be medically fragile, really have no other options, and we're sort of managing all of that, and who can come into the facility. We also encumbered $255,000. I say we, but I really mean Julie Sanchez and the finance department doing a tremendous job together to put out those emergency funds into our existing Connect network, into POs, small POs ranging from 2,500 to 25,000 for our Connect partners. And this is also a project which has added 10 new partners to that network, including 20 new logins to our system for navigators. Today, we launched a public-facing portal for Connect in partnership with the county Community Services Department, and we've already been receiving referrals. So Julie, why don't you take us into the portal and just show the committee what it looks like if people haven't already seen it? Is that something you can do? Or I guess, Rich, you're gonna have to do that for us since you're controlling the screen. If you can click that link below, that'll show.
While you're waiting for that, Madam Chair, can I ask a question about that, or do we want to do questions after?
I'm muted or unmuted. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Kira, what's your preference? Are you okay with questions?
I'm fine with questions, sure. I can be a fascinating.
I think, as long as we don't get too sidetracked, it's fine to capture them as we go, because I think there's going to be a lot of information presented here.
So ask the question.
Yes.
Okay, it's just quick about the connect. I'm appreciative we have that option and that we're able to have people make a connection, not just related to COVID-19, but other resources and needs. I'm just curious though, I saw that the connect, you have to have a smartphone and you have to have computer or have a computer. So I'm wondering, how are we reaching folks that don't have either of those? Or have
For now, yeah, great question, Counselor Chair, Counselor Villarreal. For now, we don't have the capacity to basically man a phone bank, although that is our next step. We definitely want that. And we're working with Rich, and I have been talking with John Munoz and others in the leadership team about city employees who may be on admin leave or able to help us man a phone bank on this. So that would definitely be a goal, short order, to help people come in more directly. It's not ideal for sure. Of course, if people are going into these agencies, as they have been all along, if they're going to the Food Depot, if they're going to LifeLink, they will get help through Connect and can continue to do that on foot. We would like to have a phone option though.
Thank you.
So this is, there's a link on the main city webpage, and then you get taken to this Connect portal, and then you can fill in your basic information. If you go down and click Spanish, then those questions will appear in Spanish. And then what happens that's new here is that this information goes to a care coordination team, which is made up of a couple of folks from the city community services, one from the community services department, one from the Department of Affordable Housing, as well as some staff from the county who will sort of look through the referrals and route them to the proper agencies. Here's a visual I think some of you have already seen of some of our partners in Connect Network. It's not the most up to date because as Julie can tell you, we've added 10 new agencies, but we now have, I think there are 47 programs, and I can't remember how many agencies, maybe in 37 different agencies. And we now have 100 navigators in the system helping folks. And what it means is that they do a screening of their basic social needs. They identify if there's an emergency with the flexible funding, and all of it is tracked in the software so that we'll have some really good data on the scope of need, both pre and post, COVID, especially now that we have this portal. So that's what we've been doing in with the Connect network. Rich, can we go back to the slide deck? And maybe Dawn to the next slide. This was kind of a good framing that Rich provided. What are we looking at doing right now? We're just remaining vigilant, looking at other making sure that the things we've stood up work and are going well. There's a lot of need out at Midtown in terms of care coordination and support of guests, and we're daily working on how to best do that. We also want to keep our eyes on the prize of flattening this curve and keeping community spread at a minimum. Thinking about tinderboxes where we might do interventions like encampments, nursing homes, our summer programs. We're looking very closely at all of that. On the subject of nursing homes, we coordinated with the county to communicate with Department of Health and their Division of Health Improvement. And they're working very closely with all of our nursing homes in Santa Fe and assisted living facilities, doing trainings, testing, monitoring. So we're looking at things like, can we adopt a nursing home? Something other communities have done around the country, which basically means, you're given some residents to call and check in on because people are so isolated, and just try to see how they're doing every day for 15, 20 minutes. We definitely are concerned that, having asked the question, what do you need? We will find out that we can't meet the need. And that's certainly a hazard. So how to meet the high community need for emergency assistance. And then really, just to be honest, our stretched internal capacity. You know, this is, everyone keeps saying it's a marathon, not a sprint, but our whole team has been sprinting like marathon runners, I have to say. So I'm just concerned about, you know, keeping up staff support really in this time, which is quite tough. But I have never been prouder of our team. It's just amazing in community services and across the city. The way that we've retooled, the way that you know, youth specialists are now working at senior services and at the Midtown campus, how librarians have stepped up, who are always comfortable serving this population of homeless folks to staff the shelter. And it's been a really incredible thing to see the way that everyone's really pulling together. Next slide. Schedule. So this is you know, we opened Midtown, I think it was on the 27th. We had our first guest. We also, obviously, we're working remotely for non-essential staff, which was no small feat. Joshua Alicio and his team were absolutely incredible in getting us all to be able to get out of our offices and to work from home. And I feel we've never been more productive, and it's kind of well, I don't know, put a pin in that. We'll visit that. It's very interesting, you know, whereas I used to, you know, have 15 minutes between meetings. Now I can do like 8 meetings in a day on WebEx without ever getting out of my seat. How productive, right? And I think that's true for a lot of people on our team. We're basically, as you know, today we launched Connect to the public, which we're real excited about. And then also, Regina Wheeler is working in close coordination, as I have been, with Department of Health, because they've identified one wing of the Midtown campus that's going to be just for COVID positive people who don't have a place to be and who need more intensive medical monitoring, perhaps oxygen, and just more regular check-ins. And so that partnership is in the works, and we expect within the next week or so that will be solidified, and we'll have that facility up for anyone, and probably anyone in the region who needs like, not just in Santa Fe. You know, looking forward, it's hard to look toward the beginning of the new fiscal year, but definitely concerned about infusing Connect with relief funds. We've had a really nice partnership I'll tell you about in a minute that is kind of a model for how we could build those funds not solely reliant on city GRT. We of course want to address the long-term housing and social needs of people at Midtown in particular, but everyone who's now in the shelter. It's interesting, this is kind of a unique opportunity to do what we've been trying to do for a year or more with the Built for Zero project, which was get a by name list of everyone in Santa Fe who's experiencing a housing crisis and understand what they need to get housed. Well, now we more than ever know where folks are, know what they need, and have a way of getting our arms around it. So it's sort of this challenge about how to think about Midtown and our exit strategy in Midtown as, you know, getting folks stably housed in the long term. So that's a goal for fall, I would say, I mean, that we're working on now. But we have some really exciting projects in the works regarding housing that perhaps in another meeting we can talk about. So it's so that, again, I hope that people who are experiencing this crisis now, whom we're serving now, don't are offered a long-term stable option. And then I think we can go to the next slide. So our next steps really are to bolster supports for the guests at Midtown, identify and create those long-term solutions for housing. We're really fortunate with Connect to be able to have data that we can analyze that. I hope we can work with this committee to do that, to really determine the need in various realms, from food security to housing, and create policies and prioritize our resources. We're just also always coordinating with our community partners to really seek increased resources. We know that as the city faces a budget crisis, we're going to have to be creative about how we continue to help those in our community. And so that's something we're looking at as well. I breezed through this, and I have Julie here, who is an expert on the details. So if anyone has questions for us now, I'd love to open it up for questions, Rich, if that's okay on this portion, and then we can go on to economic development.
Do we have questions from the committee?
Got one.
Yes, Councilor Garcia.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks to you and your team for setting this up. I mean, it's a huge undertaking, so kudos to you guys, and hopefully you're getting some sleep. I know it's been a lot of work. My question was kind of framed around accomplishment 4 and 5. So accomplishment 4, do you know how long the DOH is going to be supporting folks in hotels?
Well, right now that in Santa Fe, they are not supporting people in hotels. So we are supporting people in through the county and city funding in hotels. And so that's another reason to utilize Midtown, because it's proven relatively cost effective, and Regina can talk in more detail or provide more detail about the finances there. It's much more cost effective to have people at Midtown once the initial costs of getting the facilities out of the mothballs have been invested. But you know, it must be said that not every person is a good candidate for Midtown because of the public health focus of Midtown. People need to be compliant and stay in place. There's no coming and going unless people have jobs, in which case there's some special exceptions there. But the DOH is not actually currently funding hotels. It proved not feasible in the long run, in part because of the kind of support that the people needed who were at hotels. I hope that answers the question, Councilor Chair.
Sure, no, it does. And so, and I'm assuming the resources are, I shouldn't assume the resources are coming from the emergency funds that we made available.
That's correct, Chair, Councilor Garcia. We had made available, I believe it was $20,000 to Interfaith, and I think it was also 20,000 to St. Elizabeth, and those funds were used for the hotels. And right now, because of the matched county funding on that, we're holding steady, but we are in conversations with, as I said, most of the guests at St. E's are back in St. E's. I forgot to mention that Edward Archuleta was able to get his whole population tested. They all tested negative, as well as the staff. And so they opted to go back to St. E's and isolate in place, which is now the best practice. So those folks who are at St. E's will not be coming and going. And he's not accepting new guests at St. E's, because the few guests he has staying in a hotel are working and they need to come and go. And so they're appropriate to stay in the hotel. We're in conversation with Joe and his staff and board at Pete's around the best next steps there in terms of the people they've got in hotels. So it's right now it is city and county funding that is keeping folks in the hotels.
Okay, and then so with the goal that we get them out of hotels and into Midtown, and I guess that kind of goes into my next question about accomplishment 5. What do we anticipate the capacity for Midtown being? So are we going to have enough space to move potentially everybody that's currently in a hotel to Midtown, or are we going to hit capacity at some point and have to put folks back into hotels?
Yeah, Chair, Councilor Garcia, that's a very good question. We have 44 people in hotel. So my understanding is that the way that Midtown is structured, we have divided the populations into levels. So level 1 is sort of general population, homeless, asymptomatic, because they need to be in different parts of the facility. Level 2 is symptomatic, awaiting testing. Level 3 is awaiting a test result. Level 4 has tested positive. Again, we don't have any of those folks. And then I guess when you test negative, you're back to level 1, but we don't necessarily want to put you in the general population because you've sort of tested negative. So you could actually be called a level 5. So bear with me. we have for level 1 sort of general population purposes, 70 beds right now, 70 individual rooms and beds. And there are, my understanding is there are about 50 people in hotels right now. Again, not all of those people would be good candidates to come to Midtown. We're going to need to keep a certain number of people in hotels because they need to come and go every day. They won't be able to comply with the strictures of Midtown. So I would say that if we were just doing the math of depopulating the hotels and moving people over, yes, we have capacity. We have, and then a little bit of additional capacity for level 1 folks. For the other categories, the numbers are really dictated by the kinds of rooms, whether they're sharing bathrooms, et cetera, and trying to maintain isolation among those different levels and what their needs are. And the capacity there is, I wanna say, we have about, I think it's close to 40 additional beds for those population. And then there's people who are COVID positive and need that additional medical monitoring and support. And we have 118 beds currently for that population. It's hard to predict how much we're going to need, but we just kind of need to do a case-by-case determination as we get each referral. Is we want to prioritize people who are medically affected by COVID, needing a test, exhibiting symptoms. We want to make sure we have rooms for them. And then people that are just part of the general population, we're prioritizing people who are medically fragile, who might be at risk for COVID or really just can't be on their own and can't be out on the street. So it's kind of a case-by-case negotiation, and it's a very complex formula that the staff out there and Regina Wheeler is juggling, but she's got it very firmly mapped out. And right now we feel that we do have good capacity, but there will still be a place for the hotels in this response, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you for the clarification.
Counselor Garcia, did you have your questions asked and answered? Great. Counselor Rivera?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kira, do we know, since we're in a state of emergency, if FEMA's made any funding available to communities?
Councilor Rivera, my understanding is that we are now, we can be reimbursed for all of the COVID related expenses, and the finance director and her team have directed everyone to code things according to whether it's a COVID response. So all of the expenses that we're incurring at Midtown fall into this category. All of the hotels we're paying for fall into this category. Much of the funds that have been put into the Connect network for emergency needs related to COVID fall into that category. So there's now a tracking code, and each department director turns in a tracking sheet weekly to the finance department so that we can receive reimbursement, I believe, not only from FEMA, but from a couple of other federal agencies.
Great. And then my second question was about food, and I don't know if you're going to get into that at a later time or if someone else can talk about it, but I've heard there's some pretty long lines there on Siler Road, and just curious how the food situation's going and really how much food do we have? Do we have a couple weeks worth, a couple months worth? Are things being replenished on a daily basis? If you can just touch on some of that, that would be great.
Chair Romero Worth, Councilor Rivera, Rich Brown can talk in more detail about the food security efforts. I began sort of coordinating those, and thankfully was relieved of that duty, and that was handed over to Rich. So he's going to cover a lot of that in his presentation as well.
All right, we can wait for that, and Rich can, address some of that when he goes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. Counselor Villarreal.
Just to follow up on the funding sources, so the FEMA funds cover those expenses related to COVID. Is that part of the CARES Act federal funds that are available? Or is that a separate kind of funding pool that we may be able to apply for to cover some of our costs related to emergency response?
Madam Chair and Councilor Villarreal, the CARES Act is mainly toward small businesses. There's two main programs in it. They're called the EIDL program, which is economic injury loans. And then the second one is the paycheck protection one. So CARES is a separate stimulus program outside of FEMA for emergency management.
Okay. So that was not just small businesses, but also nonprofits, right?
Nonprofits and small business, yes. Nonprofits, yes.
So there's nothing
And
part of
self-employed.
CARES? Oh, go ahead.
And
Self-employed.
self-employed.
Okay, so there's nothing part of the CARES Act, because I haven't seen all the components and I heard very complex, but is there anything else in there that related to homelessness or housing, emergency housing?
Councilor Villarreal, not in the CARES Act. It's mainly a business stimulus program currently. And I know there's another COVID-19 package that they're trying to negotiate with the federal government right now. That'll be more. And so we'll cross our
Chair
fingers.
Romero Worth, Councilwoman Villarreal, the other funding sources for the housing efforts come from CDBG funds. Lad has identified some emergency funds that have become available. I believe that Homeland Security is also funding some efforts. And so there are, as I mentioned, multiple federal sources that I believe the Finance Department is tracking most closely in terms of how we go after that reimbursement or support.
Great, thanks for the clarity. That's all I have.
Counselor Cassett Sanchez.
Thank you. Again, thank you so much to everybody who's been working so hard. I know this is a constantly moving target and unprecedented time. So thank you so much to the staff to, for doing all your work and then some. So I just wanted to make sure that you know how much we appreciate it. Regarding, so you mentioned St. Elizabeth, they currently are not taking any new individuals. If Pete's Place has anybody new come and is looking for housing, is looking for shelter, are they taking them in or are they referring them over to Midtown? How are we handling any fluctuations in the homeless population?
So Chair, Councilor Kasich Sanchez, at Pete's, they're screening, they're taking temperatures and they're admitting guests sparingly as needed. It seems like from talking to Joe at Pete's, the population is holding pretty steady right now. He's not getting a lot of people coming that are new. And what we've asked staff at the shelters to do is to call the Midtown and kind of talk it through to figure out if that person is a candidate for Midtown. We've also partnered with the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness so that they can be the general number if individuals seeking shelter in Santa Fe are having trouble finding shelter, they're directed to call the coalition. They also have some emergency flex funds for hotels and they can troubleshoot and sort of triage where folks go. I can't say for certain that people who would normally stay in shelter are getting the kind of shelters that they need right now. And I think that's part of what I flagged, the encampments and the need for some street outreach here is kind of our next, if we're gonna magically pull ourselves up and attack the next thing, and I think we are, that's gonna be really doing street outreach and getting a better sense on who's out in the community unsheltered and how to get them to Midtown or hotels or another option to be determined.
Okay, thank you. That was actually my next question about, are we keeping track of what's going on with the street encampments and has there been any outreach there? So I'm glad to hear that that is on the agenda and something
It's on
that,
the agenda.
yes. You had mentioned, so I just wanted to confirm that general population Midtown is primarily focusing on the homeless population, correct? Or only focusing?
Chair, Councilor Sanchez, Cassie Sanchez, that's correct. Although I guess when I said general population, I meant general homeless population. So not housed, but not symptomatic. However, that said, the Department of Health wing, which will be staffed by the Department of Health, for that 118 beds for COVID positive people, will not be exclusively for homeless people. It'll be for people that should not be at home if they have a home and they can't be at home for whatever reason. It could be frontline healthcare workers who don't want to go home or shouldn't go home. It could be others, essential workers, for example, if need be. So that is not exclusively, that COVID positive wing is not exclusively for homeless folks.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Yeah, that was, you knew where I was going with that question as well. So thank you. Then lastly, oh, sorry, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, I'm sorry. So you had mentioned that, one of the challenges in terms of, working with the homeless population is that we know that it's a varied population, and some individuals, are going to be able to come here and will be able to stay in one place. There are other individuals that we know might need more assistance in terms of mental health to really assist them with staying in one place, with quarantining, with reducing their chances of transmission and then potentially spreading it through the community. Do we have a resource right now of how we might be assisting with this population? I know that there's probably also, this is a traumatic time for them. So I would be concerned about there being, additional pieces of some of that mental health piece coming up. Have we managed to start to scratch that surface at all yet?
Chair, Councilor Cassie Sanchez, I'd say we've done a little more than scratch the surface on it because it's a prime concern for the staff and myself. We have a wonderful resource that the county offered in the form of New Mexico Solutions, which is the contractor for the crisis center that is going to be coming online still in the fall. They were already on contract and they were scheduled to start taking over the mobile crisis response team work that PMS had been doing. So the community services director at the county and the county manager agreed to have them focus their work at Midtown instead. And so they are daily doing phone check-ins with all of our guests and coordinating among the providers in Santa Fe, everything from medication to just mindfulness support to de-stressing. And that's helped tremendously. It's hard to replace face-to-face support, and the shelter staff is offering that because they're just amazing people. And then so that's helping, but it's a stressor. And I think we're working out a system of that care coordination among the behavioral health providers that's not quite nailed down yet because people have different ideas, and we have every other day meetings on it, but I think we're getting close. And at very least right now, every guest at Midtown gets contacted both by Healthcare for the Homeless by phone, as well as New Mexico Solutions and their team. And they're bringing in, MCO care coordination to do long-term solutions for housing and other needs, as well as coordinating with our local providers, everyone from the MIHO team on the fire department to, again, PMS, Santa Fe Guidance Center, LifeLink, and all the players that often it takes a team to support some of these guests. But it also must be said that the situation is really bringing out, it seems, a desire among the guests to sort of rise to the occasion of the moment, this opportunity to be healthy, to be stable. Regina and her team quickly put to work folks that have tested negative to helping with maintenance of the facility and custodial work, and they're getting paid out of the Better Way contract, which was not working. So they're able to save money and really, define their goals. So it's been really amazing actually to see how how a public works director and her staff and librarians and youth specialists and parks and rec folk have just said, what do you need as a human being, guest of Midtown, and how can we try to connect you with it? And nobody wants to see these people just walk out the door without a really stable next move, which is just a high goal to have.
Wonderful, thank you. I really, that makes me really happy to hear. And I'm really heartened to see how we are taking this extremely difficult situation and also finding opportunity there. And so I really want to recognize that you guys are looking at that next step as not just how does this assist us with dealing with COVID, but also some of these more long-term goals and how does this now become an opportunity as we look at developing a new normal. So those are all my questions, but thank you again so much.
Julie, I brought you along here, but I wondered if you could just close it out by mentioning some of the new partners that have joined in the Connect network and even any updates on our live referral platform.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you all hear me okay?
Julie, can I have you just hold for a minute? Sorry, my computer for some reason keeps freezing. So I have a couple more questions from counselors. If we could just finish those out and then we'll go to you, Julie. Counselor Rivera.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kira, you were talking about Pete's shelter, and it reminded me that, in normal situations, they'd probably be getting ready to shut down overnight stays for a while. Are they planning on staying open longer, and do they have the funding to do that?
Chair Romero-Worth, Councilor Rivera, we have begun conversations with them about staying open through the summer and continuing to serve the folks that they have there now. And they're discussing with their board what that would take and how feasible that would be. But that is a goal for this time, given the extraordinary circumstances. It's obviously better for public health and safety if the people that are currently in the shelter who are being monitored daily in terms of their health, their temperature, maintaining social distancing. If we can continue to do that through this crisis time, that is definitely a goal of the city, and we're having those conversations with Interfaith right now.
All right, and do we know if they have the funding, or are they still trying to figure that out?
So right now they have 35 people in the shelter. During the summer for the women's safe haven, they usually have about 25 to 35 women there. So it may not be as much an issue of funding as sort of retooling and refocusing. If we're able to host people that are in hotels at Midtown and take that burden off of them. They're doing amazing work right now, case managing those folks in hotels as well as taking care of the 35 people. So they usually reduce their staff in the summer and give people a break. I would say it's to be determined, and we're certainly open to hearing from them about what they would need to continue through. It's a big reframe for them.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We have a chair still. Did we lose chair? While we're waiting, I just had a quick question, Kira, about the street outreach or the goal for that. I was just curious, what would be the procedure if we see tent shelters developing underneath the culverts, as we've been seeing? What's the best way to approach that? I usually call PD, but I'm wondering if they are directing those folks to where they need to be safe about you know, isolating or, you know, splitting up from, because I've seen some tent groups like more than 5. So which about that? Should we still call PD? Should we call someone else? I don't know.
Those are conversations that I'd say the leadership team is having daily around what the best policies are. I mean, everyone's looked at best practices across the country right now, and it's to not break up encampments during this time, but to provide better public safety and public health options for those folks, including if feasible to bring them into shelter. So I can't really speak for what PD's procedure is right now and what the official policy is. I think that's still being worked out, but I am working in community services. We're working with the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness on, they're working to put together kind of a poster of, you know, public health information. And we're working with Parks and Rec to identify opportunities to bring in additional bathrooms with hand washing stations. And then we really need to stand up an outreach team that can, in partnership with some of the community partners who do outreach, in some ways, do a more coordinated approach to really doing this connection with those communities. The fire department already does sort of drops of resources, and now include like hand sanitizers and, you know, tissues and things that people need. But I think our next big move as a city is to really address that issue across departments in a concerted way. And I would say we're close, but we're not quite there yet. So I don't have the right position to tell you what to do in that situation quite yet.
I may go ahead and
it's case by case.
I'll go ahead and ask PD when we go to the next item about that and see if they have any ideas about the best approach. Thank you.
Okay, are there other questions from counselors? Sorry about that. I lost my connection there, so I'm glad you all carried on without me. I don't have any other hands up. I also have lost control of the platform, so until I get that back, you might have to wave at me in order for me to see that. So anyway, I believe, Kira, you wanted Julie to close out. And,
thank you, Chair Romero-Worth. I just wanted to give her a chance to give you a little snapshot of that network and what's happened with it most recently, Julie.
Perfect.
Great. So you guys can all hear me? Awesome. So like Kira was saying, we've allocated about $255,000 in flex funding to 16 community organizations. Everything from addressing food insecurity, which I know Councillor Rivera brought up, and then of course housing. We have a number of agencies that are working specifically with our undocumented population, which I know has been a huge concern in our community. So we have about we have about 9 organizations working with that population who are very trusted in that community. So Dreamers, New Mexico Immigrant Law Center, Los Cumbres, Many Mothers, La Familia, some really familiar organizations that I'm sure a lot of you have heard of. We've also got some brand new folks in, and we have about 10 of those organizations, everything ranging from youth shelters and family services to now, as of this morning, the Santa Fe Indian Center. Just a lot of groups that are going to be able to connect their clients into our network. And it's really exciting to be able to expand to some of these more specific populations who we know have quite the number of disparities in our community. There's also been some capacity and growth within a couple of our agencies. So some agencies really wanted to expand other of their programs coming into the network. So we were able to do that with an additional logins for agencies like LifeLink, New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness, and Los Cumbres. So they'll have more of their programs and more of their navigators in the system. So it's been really exciting. Everybody's really on board with this. And we really hope to continue expanding and growing this network. So thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Okay, yeah,
Madam Chair.
Councilor Casa Sanchez, are you waving at me?
Yes, yeah, I am. Thank you. I had a quick question about, so I know that we're working on how we can make sure that people are linked into this, and through all these networks, they will also be linking their partners into this. We have it on our website. You mentioned Food Depot as well, so as people go to. I know I saw a presentation on Connect a long time ago, but will we be able to pull this data to really inform us of general needs across the community as a city, and be able to really utilize that to continue to shape our response moving forward as we move deeper into this?
Chair Romero Worth, Councilor Cassup Sanchez, absolutely. That's really the point in so many ways. It's both a tool to help people, but it's really also a tool to gather the data on the scope of the need. So it's a great software system in that you can pull aggregate reports on, you know, how many people had identified as homeless, how many people identified as at risk of losing their home in 30 days. You know, which areas of the city did they come from? Which agencies were serving them in what ways, which agencies were not, you know, and that's true for all of the social determinants that the screening tool looks at currently. And if we want to add additional questions, we can do that as well. So it gives us that flexibility. So we can break it down in terms of what's happening for women in the community, what's happening for certain age groups. I hope we will be able to use the data to really inform the policy decisions and directions that this committee would like to take.
That's really exciting. Thank you. And then is that something that we will be getting updates on here? Will we be getting those regular updates?
Chair Romero Worth, if that's something that the committee decides it wants, I could absolutely provide updates monthly. It's very easy to pull those reports from the system, so we could provide that as part of your regular packet if you'd like.
Yeah, I think we're in a learning mode about how to move forward, and this certainly is something that we're going to have continued interest in. So I think that's a good idea. And then Councilor Sanchez, did you have other questions?
Nope, I was just saying that was all that I had. So thank you.
Okay, perfect. Councilor Villarreal, I believe you had a question.
Yes, just to follow up. Thank you, ladies, for the information. And I'm happy to hear that we had funding going out to the community to support emergency needs. Are these in a form of grants? And if so, what's the range and size of the grants that are being given out to the nonprofit partners?
Julie, I'll let you take that.
So Councilwoman Villarreal, right now the grants are ranging in about sizes from $20,000 to about $5,000. Really, we took the data from Unite Us and allocated funding to those who were really using the system and had a really high need for services and for flex funds.
Thank you. Just wanting, I was just curious the size.
And I'll just add, I'm sorry, Councilwoman Villarreal, thanks, Julie. So what we did is, you know, we have existing contracts with most of the agencies in the network. We did an additional PO and MOU, is that right? An MOU?
Agreement.
I always get the MOs mixed up. On how to use the flex funds. There's a really, there was an existing policy that the county and the city had determined together and had been reviewed by our legal departments in terms of what an allowable use on the flex funds is. So the navigators all know what that is. All of the money that went out from the emergency funding is going to direct resident support. So none of it is for overhead, none of it is for operations. All of that is funded in our separate contracts in the Human Services Committee. And hopefully we'll be in the Children and Youth Commission when we go forward with those grants. And so it's all direct relief, and it can all be tracked, and all of the expenditures are provided as backup with the invoicing each month. And so we can add to those POs if we have funding to do so as need be. But right now, that's where we're at.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry guys, I keep getting kicked out. I don't know what's wrong with my internet today. This is making this very challenging. So I think, do we have other questions here? Rich, are you gonna chat with us about what we're doing in the area of food?
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a whole deck that it encompasses economic development and food as I've been tasked with it. So thank you all. Following the same sort of format that Kira did, I wanted to talk to you about what we're doing on the economic development side. We've also taken on the task of food security. So as I get through the slides, I'll talk about food security and what we're doing on the business and job side. I wanted to start my presentation with just some stats that can sort of frame the severity of this current situation. Current to the Wall Street Journal yesterday, 17 million people have applied in the past 3 weeks for unemployment. And it's predicted by June that the unemployment average will rise to 13%. And the rate was at 3.5 in February. Current stats that I know of from the county as of February was that we had total labor force of 76,429 with 73,383 that were employed with an unemployment rate of 4.0. So, and I talk about big risk here, and I say that if we meet the trend that's moving toward June 20, we will have approximately 9,000 new unemployed and financially insecure residents. And as I talk to other folks about the pandemic, I say that this pandemic is not only driving our health priorities, but it's also driving the economic downturn timeline. So we're looking at two different lanes that are moving, and we're in the marathon with everyone else right now, but we're trying to get in front of it. From an overview of economic development, key milestones, which everybody knows about the governor's declaration, the mayor's proclamation, we've been tasked with these initiatives of providing information and resources for small businesses affected by the downturn, create an information-rich website for the community, which on the left-hand side is altogethersantafe.org, and then launch and maintain an interim Wi-Fi hotspot for targeted community locations. And then I was asked to join with Kira to create a food security solutions for isolated, quarantined, underserved, and economically insecure residents. This audience is getting bigger and bigger. And then also launch a series of community outreach programs to reach our low information community to help spread health advisories so that they know the seriousness of what we're dealing with in this pandemic. The economic development actually is looking at it from a four-layered standpoint: small businesses, community, workforce, and health and wellness. And you'll see all the resources, information for that on our website, altogethersantafe.org. Our goal is, again, to provide the information and resources to small businesses. We want to tap our ecosystem to leverage what they know to help our small businesses in Santa Fe with state and federal stimulus programs. We also want to reach out to our immigrant and Spanish-speaking small businesses to ensure that they have equal access to stimulus information and resources. We're with Connect now, and also with our webinars that we're doing, we're building a database of businesses that are taking advantage of the stimulus to track progress so that we can see when everyone's ready to open based upon whether they're getting a loan or grant or something from the state that'll sustain them for when we're ready to go back out and do business. And then we're also looking for ways to promote work opportunities for furloughed and unemployed residents as the unemployment rate starts to rise. From a community standpoint, as we look at Altogether Santa Fe, promote health and safety with community outreach. We want to give out masks and sanitizers and provide materials. We're working with community services on creating a rack brochure that we can give out at the food distribution sites that talk about how to get services through Connect, also how to get to the website and the upcoming Wi-Fi locations that they could use in case they don't have internet access. And we're populating altogether Santa Fe with innovative resources for all effective residents. Those are some of the goals that we're looking at, just to figure out all the different channels to reach out, to make sure that we provide health and safety alerts and resources, and also based on the Supreme Court ruling yesterday, how to apply for absentee voting, get an application, because you can do that once the Wi-Fi hotspots are set up. As I said earlier, I am looking at the food security side. We're in the middle of our goal of creating a tiered approach to food pantry supply for new and isolated residents, what the food options are for there. Currently, YouthWorks is supplying the food prepared meals for those at Midtown. We're also monitoring and aggregating the local food supply to address the future food security needs based upon Councilor Rivera's question. We're also working with the county on that program. They have a program called Aggregate. And then we're working with food pantry partners, currently Food Depot right now, to look at what the future need is, capital resources, to sustain us through this emergency of the pandemic. And it's just a food pantry solution, but if we have to get to a prepared meal side, if the pandemic gets worse, we are ready to stand up and pilot something that we're working with some partners at the community college and the convention center. Some of our progress so far, we've launched the SCORE business resource webinars. We had 500 people, 500 businesses actually registered to attend. About 368 attended via Zoom, and about another 140 attended via YouTube. We worked with the state EDD, Workforce Solutions, SBA, and some of our entrepreneur ecosystem partners. And we are now about to set up a targeted stimulus topics scheduled over the remaining of the quarter. On Friday, we have another SCORE webinar. It'll actually be in Spanish, and it's for the general business audience. But tomorrow, we are standing up a Spanish language Facebook Live. It'll be a series of forums, like twice a week, talking about different resources that one would need if you do not speak English. And we're partnering with Somos Pueblo Unido. Other small businesses, I talked about launching that yesterday. One of the big things that's happened is one of our local tech companies is created a foundation, and they have a bridge relief fund for small mom and pop businesses that are annual revenues of less than $100,000. They're giving out $300 a month for 3 months for all the employees in those businesses. And all they need to do is to go to the Polling Cutters Foundation page and sign up. And I think right now they have 71 businesses who've signed up so far. On the community side, I've spoken a little bit about this. We've launched about to launch the Wi-Fi hotspots. We hope to have them up and coming and going at the libraries at least by May, and then throughout the city and different school locations in the districts. They're not 5G, has nothing to do with 5G, it's just Wi-Fi. The Wi-Fi is already in the buildings. We're just extending it to the parking lots, and it will only go as far as a parking lot. So it's not a neighborhood wide, it's just a parking lot wide Wi-Fi hotspots. And as you know, I've talked about Altogether Santa Fe. We've launched the website, and we have a plethora of resources and information on that website, and it's growing every day. We have a button at the bottom, or section at the bottom, where you can fill out a Google form that tells us if you have a resource that you'd like to share with the community. This website is also translated into Spanish, and then we also using some of our non-essential employees who speak Spanish, who are helping us translate all of the different materials that we are working on. I'm working with emergency operations, and Make Santa Fe is our makerspace, and they're working to create masks and sanitizers currently for our city employees, but we want to extend that out with other local makers to get masks and sanitizers out to the community because we want to push that curve down. And one way to do that is to distribute masks and sanitizers where there are what we call touch points. And those touch points are at those Food Depot takeaway locations, or where Kitchen Angels or YouthWorks goes to give out prepared meals for folks who may or may not have a mask. And we're also working with the county, and Kira, Julie and I are working with the county to figure out how to connect into the Connect program as a great way to make sure that the data that we're collecting from that allows us to look at what policy solutions and what ways we need to pivot, because each day is very different as it relates to this pandemic. On to the food security side, we've been working with the Food Policy Council, Food Depot, and others in our food ecosystem to create this food security mix that relates to fresh food, farm fresh food, pantry boxes, working with the schools, and then working with the folks who are doing deliveries with prepared meals right now. We've also named Robert Eggers, who's a nationally recognized urban food security expert. He's come on as a food advisor, so he's working with me and the different ecosystem partners to make sure that we are getting ahead of the curve, looking at our food supply. He's been charged with working with Shamrock Foods to make sure that we can monitor what the food supply would be from a standpoint of food pantries well-served, youth workers well-served, et cetera. And then we're also partnering with the Community Foundation and the county to look at our funding, our capital source needs from foundations and municipalities to focus on the food supply program so that it's not 100% burden of the city. Some attention areas, because of the high need of food distribution, and the depot is causing traffic congestion based on Councilor Rivera's question. We're looking at other distribution locations. Right now, the community college has verbally agreed to allow us to do food distribution at the community college. So that'll break up some of the traffic there because there are mostly schools out there and no sort of consumer traffic going back and forth. So we're going to meet with them tomorrow to see if we can make a plan there. I've also reached out to the Santa Fe Place Mall, and then we were also going to look at the fire stations as to further distribute areas where we could pass out food and health items like masks and sanitizers. There has been reports that FEMA is confiscating food supplies nationwide, so that has been a concern for us. And so we've been working with Shamrock Foods to figure out whether or not we are forecasted for the next 45 days. What is the food situation so that we won't be hit blindsided by any food supplies that we might need. As our economic situation deteriorates, previously working residents will face extreme financial uncertainty. And then without the federal stimulus from the government, our city also is going to have less funding to activate this economy. One of the things I am in the process of doing, working with legal and land use, is that we are looking at some of our underperforming land assets to sell so that we can have a windfall revenue that we could use to stand up some of the other activities that are going on in the city on top of all of the things that you're reading about here today. Another risk is that the federal stimulus for the PPP in particular is running dry. I read today that as of this evening or tomorrow morning, that the Paycheck Protection Program, which is PPP, may not have any more funding left. But I know that the House is looking at putting together another COVID funding program, which will probably replenish the PPP program. So I'm working with our ecosystems, or my team is, to figure out what has to happen next. As long as they have an application in, they can get queued up to figure out how to leverage those different federal sources. One of the things I have been sharing in both town halls and radio programs, et cetera, is that for some of our small businesses to survive long term, they may need to take a loan because some of the programs that are offered in the state and the federal side are very short term. And while none of us knows when we're going to come out and be active on a business and on a personal side, if a small business is ready to weather that storm, they may need to look at some of the state programs that are very attractive for loans and credit for the long term. Like Kira, I had to put together a schedule. In April, we talked about our food pantry solutions. We're talking about that today. The Wi-Fi hotspots, we're hoping to have all 10 up and running by the 15th. Some will not have high bandwidth, which will happen a couple weeks later, but they should be all up and going by the 15th of May. And then I think we have another committee meeting on the 20th of May, and I will have an update on the progress of where we are with some of the activities that are going on right now. And then on the 10th of June, there's a possibility that we may come back to the governing body to request some emergency funding based upon economic and health conditions. And just as everyone knows, July 1st, our fiscal 21 begins. Next steps, From a small business standpoint, as I said, we're targeting federal and state stimulus information through SCORE. As I said, one is happening tomorrow in Spanish, but it will come on a bi-weekly basis, targeted to each of the different types of programs so that our small businesses understand what each of them does. We're working through multi-channels to spread the word on available stimulus resources and also health information. Through the chamber, through the radio, we have an economic development newsletter. We're using digital and social media. So we're trying every channel we can to reach out to folks who may have internet, may not, but we want to make sure that at least the health information and stopping the health spread is out there. And then another assignment is that we're navigating with the small businesses to our ecosystem technical partners. These are just acronyms for our different partners. SBDC is a government-run small business development center. SCORE is another federally funded business consulting group that's a free consulting service. WEST is a small regional business consulting, and we have one here in Santa Fe. Regional Development Corporation is funded by LANL, but they focus on the northern New Mexico area. And then we're also working with Santa Fe County, who has counterparts in economic development. Again, working with Somos Un Pueblo Unido, setting up the biweekly Spanish language programs. And then we are working with our non-essential employees to translate everything. We want to make sure that there's equity in information that's going out. And then ultimately, we're trying to get grant writers to help us pursue Economic Development Administration grant opportunities so that we can work through getting grants for job training and workforce development as we stabilize the city and start to have businesses ramp up again. On the community side, as Kira said, Connect was launched today, so we are working together to create a handout brochure that we can reach out to our low information residents to share resources. And so one of the ways we're going to through our touch points with the food distribution. Again, promoting the Wi-Fi hotspots to learn about Altogether Santa Fe, the Connect with distant learning, and also now we have opportunities for absentee voting applications to go online. And then the next one for the community is just health and safety, secure quantities of mask and hand sanitizer for community distribution to stop the flow of transmission. Working with county partners on Connect, again, working with them on the food pantry distribution sites because no one really sees the border of the city and the county. So we see it as just Santa Fe. And so we're looking at fire stations, public school areas, and the community college as places where we can distribute food in a more spread out way so that we're not having that congestion like we had at Capitol High, and most likely will happen this weekend at Siler Road. And then if we see a further increase in isolation and quarantine, that we're ready to potentially pilot a prepared meal plan to meet the need that could go over the burst capacity of Kitchen Angels and YouthWorks. This will be data that we'll find out through the Connect program because we'll be capturing the needs of the community. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Rich. Very informative. Questions from counselors? And I don't know if my host thing is working, so if you have a question. Yes, it is. Woohoo!
I lost my mouse. Okay.
Yeah, Councilwoman VRL, I think you have a question.
Madam Chair, I was just curious about how are we letting folks know about the access to the Wi-Fi hotspots other than through the school district that will go to hopefully the families with kids, but what about others?
Well, currently, as I said, we're working through multi-channels. We're talking on the radio, we're gonna put it in the paper, we're gonna put it in our digital Facebook, social media, and then also we're creating this little, what I call brochure. It's just one side will be Spanish, one side will be English, and it'll say that, starting on this date, you can go to these spaces to find Wi-Fi, and it might say you have to, go to a certain spot to learn about where they are, but I'm sure once they're launching, we'll change this little brochure to let people know where the spots are, because there still will be people driving in line to get food. And so we have a 3 days a week opportunity to hit these touch points with more information. Plus we have our Somos bi-weekly talk, semi-weekly talk, and we also have our score talk. So we have other ways where people can learn about what's happening in the community. Also, part of our emergency community fund money that was approved included getting information out to our community partners to help them with creating brochures or information that they could send out. One of the crazy ideas we had was to do some door knockers and then have them just walk the neighborhoods and put them on door knockers that say, here's information that you could do with the website, and either here's your closest location, here's your closest fire station, here's your closest school. So that's something that we're also working through, just getting it through the procurement process right now, but that's some ideas around that.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Cassett Sanchez.
Thank you so much. I had a question about the assistance provided to small businesses and the partners that you're working with. I know that I've seen through the experience with my husband and him talking to some of the partners that he works with in the community about individuals applying for some of those federal programs that can be a little bit complicated. Are those business partners going to be available? For example, if somebody just needs guidance in deciphering the legalese as they're reading the CARES application, is that a resource that we would provide to individuals through those business partners?
Madam Chair, Councillor, yes, that's why we want to keep the message out there that we are available, and that's why I listed all those different areas. And so they are ready to take on Santa Fe only, Santa Fe County, Santa Fe City only businesses to help with the technical assistance you need. So you can go to, mainly I'd say go to SBDC first, mainly because they have a broader range of assistance that they can provide on the federal level, but you can go to SCORE, and that's all free. So just reach out to them and they will be able to help you. And so whether you're a nonprofit or a self-employed or a small business, it is the place to go. And they are standing ready to help our businesses with the technical assistance they need.
And is that also on the Altogether Santa Fe website, having that information there?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh.
No, I wasn't. I thought I was for a minute, but no, I wasn't. So thank you so much. And then, so we talked a little bit about some of the work going on with food distributions and looking at alternative sites. I know you mentioned the public schools. Has there been discussion with the public schools for basically collaborating when they're doing their meal distributions for kids, either having the food pantries at the same time? Is there some coordination going on there as well?
Madam Chair, Councillor, yes, we are. Robert has actually been tasked with, I forgot her name, I think her name is Crystal, who works for Superintendent Garcia. And so we're working how to coordinate the food supply and distribution at the public schools. Because we also realize if we're putting Wi-Fi spots up, that also might be an additional area where you could hand out food packages. So we are working with them. I haven't had a conversation with them in the maybe 48 hours, but we are working with them to figure out how to align all of the dates together so that it's distributed much evenly for the need.
And then I'm also, I'm curious, this has been, I know, part of a conversation that I've been having a lot is that if coronavirus rate does increase and we do have the more isolation and quarantine, as we've been talking about, with food distributions, what steps are we going to take? Right now we are doing our social distancing, and the research is a little unclear as to whether or not that's actually enough when we say our 6 feet. Are we talking about, are we loading things into the back of people's cars as this potential risk for infection gets greater? How are we changing these models to address that?
Madam Chair, Councilor, that's a really good question. And I think it's a moving target on the strategy because as we're seeing more and more people who have a food need, but we're working with our partners, especially the food distribution, the pantries, et cetera, on how we make sure that they're healthy and safe. Because you can, I was just at the supermarket the other day and they basically said, you can open your trunk and we'll come out and just put it in there and you never have to see me. I never have to shake your hand or say thank you, we'll close the trunk and leave. And so that might be some of the sort of strategies around what to do as we get more and more folks out there. Something I was reading about in another city was they had also asked for everyone with a pickup truck to volunteer with like a mail carrier route with just the addresses, and they just drop off the food. They just go to the distribution center with their pickup truck. They pick up 50 packages, and then they have an address for their neighborhood, and then they go in and drop them off at locations so that there's not so much gathering of people at distribution sites. So there's a couple different ideas that are being milled around as we see a larger influx of people. Oops, are you on mute?
No, I'm not. I don't
There
believe
you
so. Okay. All right. I just said thank you very much.
Oh,
I'll go
thank
ahead
you.
and relinquish the video at the moment.
Okay, do we have other questions for Rich from the committee? Seeing none, I want to thank you again, Rich and Julie and Kira, for all the work you're doing. Please extend our thanks to your teams, to Regina Wheeler and her team at Midtown, and to our community partners. I mean, we are in exceptional times, unprecedented times, and it is really amazing to see all the work that you all have been doing to address the need in the community, and just want to really thank you. And please let us know how we can be helpful, and look forward to hearing more and hopefully adding value to your work as we move forward through this. So thank you all for being here tonight. I really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
We are, with that.
Madam Chair, I'm going to stop the share so you can take over the control of it. There
Okay.
you go.
And we will go now to our next agenda item. And I believe we have Deputy Chief Paul Joy here, correct? Are you here, Paul? Deputy Chief?
I'm here. If you guys can hear me, and Christine's gonna have to put me back on video. It won't let me open it myself here. So,
Okay.
but you can hear me.
Hi.
I hope everybody.
Counselor Romero-Worth, you're gonna have to do that because I gave you the host back.
Okay, here I go. Let's see if I know how to do that.
If everyone doesn't mind me speaking from darkness, I can keep going.
Well, oh, here we go. Here we go. I have the power. Let's see.
There we go.
Are you in?
I think so.
Ah, there you are. Fabulous. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being here. We would love to hear about all the good work that you all have been doing. And I know we had a presentation in our packets. I don't know if you're just going to be talking to us tonight, or if you needed to point to anything in particular.
Right. Yes, Madam Chair, thanks for having me, members of the committee. So real quick, I'd like to answer Councilor Villarreal's question about the camping that came up earlier. We are not actively breaking up camps. If that was the question, we're kind of taking more of a harm reduction approach, if that makes any sense. If we do respond to a camp, we are encouraging them to relocate on their own, letting them know that there are services available to them if they choose to do that. And you'll see in the presentation, there was one camp in particular that we cleared out, and that was because it was in a waterway. It was technically in the Santa Fe River under the Sandoval Bridge, I believe. And so for situations like that, we will be a little more active with getting them to relocate, just because of, there's a whole number of reasons why they need to relocate, not the least of which is that it is a safety hazard, and we've had people pass away because of flash flooding in the waterways from people camping under there. So, but if people have issues with camps, again, it's a little bit of a complex issue depending on if it's private property or city property or where it is or what they're doing. So we would encourage people to call constituent services if they have identified a camp that they're having issues with or that they think needs to be looked into, and then they'll send it our way to review and take action if necessary. So with that, I'm going to try to do my screen share here and bring up the presentation that was sent out to everyone. Hopefully, let's see, this can work. Everybody see it?
Yes.
All right. Okay. So, and I'll, at the end of the presentation, I'll go into a little bit more detail because obviously it's still ongoing. This Operation Downtown Focus is going to be continuing until August 21st. We haven't stopped it with the ongoing crisis, so that it's still active on our part. We're still interacting. We're still responding downtown and meeting with people. So I'm going to keep scrolling along. Obviously, began phase 1 was January 27th and it ended on February 9th, and that was our intel gathering phase. We sent people out to meet with business owners and folks on the street, get a impression, I guess, a feeling of what their issues were, what their problems that they were identifying, what they were wanting to see more of from law enforcement and public safety in general. And then we were compiling all the complaints or issues into our little after action report for it that we're compiling and kind of triaging, for lack of a better word, in with regard to priorities, priority 1, 2, and 3. Priority 1 being issues of violence or violent behavior, priority 2 being property damage concerns, and priority 3 being quality of life concerns. And we instituted a zero tolerance for criminal activity on the plaza and downtown area as a whole. So moving on, during the gathering phase, we have 115 business contacts that were made, 55 in-person on foot patrol contacts, and we had 52 calls for service. The little dots you're seeing here on the maps, those were from the community meetings where the business owners and residents, their general areas of home where they came from for the meeting. And we had over 100 people between the two meetings. I think everybody was, who's part of this committee was at either one or both of them. Afterwards, our little photo here, photo op that was taken from the meeting to set up phase 2. And obviously the focus of that was actionable efforts, things that we can do to make an immediate impact and try to lessen some of the issues and figure out what was going on and try to get things moving forward for everybody. And as you can see, there was a newly appointed or newly transferred Lieutenant Grunler in there. He's currently our support operations lieutenant. He had just transferred. Lieutenant Webb was a part of that meeting. He was the previous lieutenant who's now our lieutenant over Graveyard. And he gave us some extra data as well for what Graveyard's been doing, because I know there's been questions about that with kind of the current situation with the COVID crisis. So phase 2, as I said before, it's going on until August 21st. We have 2 full-time officers and then 2 full-time public safety aides that are appointed to this. They're on broken down into 2 teams of 3 that are on a rotation. Saturday is our common day, so all 6 individuals are working on Saturday, to include the fight team sergeant, makes it 7. The hours are from 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. and just continue on here. So as I mentioned before, this is the bridge, understandable. This is a pretty complex setup what they had, the camp. There were computers, they had Wi-Fi, their own Wi-Fi system down there. There was pretty elaborate, but again, we asked them to relocate for a variety of reasons. And this was in a matter of days that we gave them. I believe we gave them a few days, like 4 days to relocate, and they cleared out and they were able to go down and clean this out. Moving on to the next one, among the complaints were people camping and sleeping in the stairwells of some of the businesses downtown. I believe Randy Randall reached out to Captain Tapia from our Criminal Investigations Division. They've been working on some human trafficking presentations for the hotels and motels, and that presentation was supposed to happen until obviously the crisis came on, but everything's on pause, but we're going to continue on with that. And our partners at the Solace Center helping us with that presentation as well and that information. On the right of the screen here, you see the pamphlet that got distributed, and that was in response to a lot of the questions that were coming from the business meetings and the merchant meetings, complaints of police responded, spoke to the guy, and they didn't do anything. And that was the purpose of the pamphlet, was to explain kind of how arrests work in the state of New Mexico, and differentiate between like misdemeanors, misdemeanor exceptions, what can be arrested on scene, what cannot be arrested, what was witnessed by the officer, what not witnessed. And so all the feedback we got from those pamphlets was positive. And again, with this, the initial plan is a 6-month period, but we've been doing 30-day reevaluations and looking at the data. And on here as well, before I scroll on, there were a couple of aggressive panhandlers that are so infamous, I guess, for lack of a better term. Everybody knew them by name and was telling us in the merchant meetings about these individuals. And so the ones who were identified were given basically caseworkers by officers to focus on and again, offer services, kind of a continuation of those that we were working with Joe at the shelter. Yeah, so offer services first, but again, zero tolerance for criminal activity. And 2 of the individuals whose name came up repeatedly, she and her boyfriend have relocated to other areas of the town, but they made a point to complain to Sergeant Lopez that they were taking away their moneymaker, that we took away their moneymaker with their aggressive panhandling and harassing the businesses. So here, again, this data here was going till March 23rd, with the expectation that we were going to have our follow-up meeting the first week of April. But I can add on to a little bit of that. The 7 arrests is still current, but we now have, I believe, 557 business contacts, and our calls for service as well have gone up dramatically. It says 787 from 115 that's showing here at March 3rd. We're now 3 weeks later. So we've also deployed our message board that has had some positive impact. We've had 38 deployments around the downtown area so far. We've also issued so far 96 traffic citations, 108 parking citations, and 16 criminal citations. So those are citations, misdemeanor citations in lieu of arrest. And with that, I can open it up for questions.
Thank you, Deputy Chief. I appreciate the follow-up on this. Are there questions from the committee? Councilwoman Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Deputy Chief Joy, to provide us with the information as a follow-up. And I know that all this information went to the attendees as well of those meetings, even though we didn't have our follow-up meeting, was it last week? That information in this was shared, correct?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I do believe so. Christina Helsick worked with Captain Champlin on our end to put this presentation together. And were the topics that were going to be discussed at the follow-up meeting. And in lieu of that, we just sent out the presentation. I believe Mrs. Mahelsick did that.
Great. Thanks, Christine. The other question I had, you were talking about other notable data and that complaints have reduced dramatically. But isn't that also because the businesses are closed right now?
Well, as you can see here, the complaints reduced. That's not me. Sorry. The end of this operation for this presentation was March 23rd. And so the complaints, I just spoke to Captain Champlin about an hour ago before we had the meeting here. And he said he has had less than 5 since the initiation of this operation, whereas prior to that he was getting several a week.
So they were reduced during that time period, then obviously we have a reduction because businesses are closed and there really isn't much activity in general, hopefully. I don't know. Is that something that has been on your radar to be able to have surveillance of property downtown since a lot of the businesses are closed?
Yes, ma'am. Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, yes. And our bike team has now expanded to encompass a little more of the area of downtown and also the various walking and bike trails in and around the area. And then our graveyard patrol has stepped up as well. And they've done just since, I believe the beginning of this month, approximately 58 close patrols that have been called out in various areas downtown. They've been doing some walkthroughs of the businesses in La Fonda Hotel in particular. They asked for some extra walkthroughs. They had some safety concerns. And so it's very much on the forefront for us to keep the businesses safe that are still, who can't be there, obviously, because of the crisis, but we want to make sure that their businesses are still protected.
Thank you. And the other question I had is, now that we have a stay-at-home order, what kind of calls are you getting more of these days?
It'd be fairly anecdotal for me to talk about at this point. Still run the gamut, really. We still are, depending on the day we're talking about, calls for service, generally speaking, are a little bit slower, but not to the extent that like our officers are still very active and still very busy. But I don't know that I'd be able to say offhand, this call is more prevalent than another. So I think generally speaking, our highest call volume just by the numbers are like disorderly conducts, and those are still happening. We've been getting a lot of calls recently about people not adhering to social distancing. We've been getting a lot of calls about businesses that are not following the governor's orders, and we're handling those as they come in as well.
So should people call PD for those issues as well?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, yes. So for calls of that nature, we are not the enforcing agency for these businesses. What's essential or not essential, or whether or not they're complying with the governor's orders. State Police is the enforcing agency on that, but we are assisting at their request. So what's happening is it has to be a supervisor above at our level. We'll notify the business. Calls come in, you've been deemed either as not essential. This is just an example. There's any number of I personally handled a call yesterday that a business was allowing more than 20% capacity in their store. So what I do is I notified the store. This is the first notification. We got a complaint that you were not operating, or that you're operating beyond 20%, or you're allowing more than 20% capacity into the store. He advised me that he was well aware of the governor's orders. They're complying appropriately. This was what I will then document and dispatch as helping us is basically a first documentation. And then first documentation, second documentation will go out in person, or we'll try to go out in person, meet with who the reported violator is, and again, document that this is a second notice. And at the third notice, we forward the information over to State Police, and they make the determination for enforcement action.
Thank you for that clarity. Have you seen any more calls related for domestic violence or gender-based violence happening? Do you see an increase or not necessarily?
Madam Chair, Councilor Villarreal, I know that was a concern, and that has kind of been a hot topic nationwide, and it's been a concern that came our way as well. From our numbers, I had our crime analysts look at the data, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can tell you the answer. The March of this year compared to March of last year, our domestic violence calls are down. Also, March of this year compared to previous months of this year, our domestic violence calls are down. That doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening. There could be any number of reasons why the numbers are down. It doesn't mean that these cases aren't happening. And so when both I and Deputy Chief Valdez have responded to the media regarding this specific topic. We've been trying to do the best we can to encourage people that services are still available. We're still responding to calls. We're still helping out. We're still getting people resources if they need resources. The Solace Center is still assisting us and helping folks. So we're doing the best we can to make sure that people have a place to reach out to.
Yeah, I think because more people are at home now, there'll be less calls because the perpetrator might actually be at the house. So it's hard to figure that out. I was just curious about numbers and ways that we would be more proactive about letting people know there's still resources in a very non-direct way, but I don't know how you all would approach that if there's other ways or means to support it through other emergency service providers, but.
Sure. Well, even if I'm sorry to cut you off there, if they were to reach out to us on our social media page, they can send us a message, assuming they have access to their phone. I'm going through this situation, or if people can reach out on behalf of, hey, someone reached out and told us that they're going through this. Can you please respond? We take all of those calls and messages very seriously, and we respond to every call of domestic violence.
So if someone's on social media for the Santa Fe Police Department, if they go on and send you a private message, you all get that and you respond?
Correct. So it won't go through our dispatch. It would go through to Deputy Chief Valdez. He's the one who monitors our social media. And then you'll get kind of if you ever sent our social media page a message, you'll get kind of a canned response of like, hey, thank you for your message. We'll get back to you when we get a chance. But Deputy Chief Valdez checks that frequently and has been relaying information. We haven't had one of domestic violence yet, but just general other complaints or issues that come through, he sends it our way right away.
Maybe there's a way to let the other service providers like Solace and others know that that's an option.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, other questions from the committee? All right, well, thank you, Deputy Chief, for coming. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the compiling of all this information about all of your efforts. And we'll definitely, what is the next step on this? I know we had to cancel our last meeting with the community, with the downtown merchants. Are we just in a holding pattern at this point? Or do we have some other date out in the distance?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as far as I know, to this currently, we're just it's going to be kind of a wait and see. We have no problem rescheduling for a later time once everything blows over, and we can do that. And so we've got running numbers, so we can basically throw something together within a week's notice.
Okay. And have you heard from merchants based on the presentation this presentation that was sent out to them? Have you gotten any feedback? Any thank yous? Any hey, attaboy, attagirl, or would you do some more? Or I don't know, what are you hearing from them?
Madam Chair, I can't speak on behalf of Captain Champlin. I haven't heard anything one way or the other. I'm going to take no news as good news for now. But yeah, certainly, if obviously it's people are more inclined to let us know when something's wrong than to let us know when something's right, and that's kind of just the nature of our business.
Okay, just curious if people were feeling like the response has been adequate, but to Councilor Villarreal's point, everybody's closed, so maybe it's right now we're focused on different things. So, all right, well, I appreciate hearing about this, and we'll stay on it and see where it needs to go from here. So thank you for all your work. Please send our thanks to your teams, and really appreciate your being here tonight.
Will do. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, so with that, we have covered our agenda items, and we can now go to matters from staff. I think Christine is filling in. Jennifer has a family emergency, so she was not able to meet with us tonight. Was there anything, Christine, you need to convey to the committee?
No, Councilor Chair, there's not. I did want to just mention as follow-up to Deputy Chief Joy, We are tentatively waiting for any restrictions to reschedule a meeting with the downtown merchants. And then also, we did receive feedback. I sent out the emails, so I had responses and just businesses reaching out, saying thank you, that they were looking forward to having a follow-up meeting, but they all were very appreciative of the efforts in the downtown area from our police department. So
Great. Maybe get that feedback over to the PD so that, so they know.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Nothing else then?
No.
And I don't know if our other staff, Kira, I'd include you in that matters from staff. If there's anybody else who had anything, this would be now the staff moment. Seeing nothing, matters from the committee. Oh, there you are, Kira. Any matters? Okay, she's
No
good.
matters.
All right, thank you for being here again. Hang in there. Matters from the committee. Anything the committee needs to? All right, you all look great. And then I think our next meeting is May. I don't have I had to use my other computer, so I've lost the agenda. Christine, what our next meeting is?
May 6th.
May
May
6th.
6th.
Oh,
Okay.
thanks, Counselor.
Okay, all right. Well, I think this has been a great start to this committee. I'm really looking forward to working with the members here. We've had some conversations, definitely open as we form these agendas to your ideas, to the things you're interested in. We have a very broad charge, and we can see from tonight, with just 2 presentations, there's an awful lot of information that we're getting and that we'll need to digest and figure out, how to move forward. So I look forward to working with all of you, and I think if there's nothing else, we're adjourned.
All right, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody.